to another episode of the Raw Knowledge Podcast with your host, as ever, myself, Alex Connor. And we're back with another guest and the man himself from Modern Wisdom, going to share some out loud, I'm sure. Mr. Chris Williamson, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate your time. Now, some of the listeners may know who you are, and if not, and they Google you, I'm pretty sure they're going to find out quite soon. You speak to a multitude of guests. It's an amazing role. There are so many ideas flying around in the room. Before we start to divulge on some of them, what I thought would be good is to kind of go back and talk about you and your beginnings in terms of how you even stumbled upon podcasting. But even before then, like if my memory serves, you're a club promoter. That was kind of the thing that came before podcasting. Was there anything else as well that led you to this point, or anything worth mentioning that you did as a career before you got into now speaking to people around the globe?
No, so I arrived at university, I was skint, I sat next to this guy, he said, I can get you a flyering job, giving out flyers for club nights like a lot of students do, and 15 years later, that guy and me are still business partners, so we've managed to build a business off the back of being good flyers, essentially, and got my first franchise at 19, started a business running weeklies at 21, did a placement year with my business partner, so on and so forth. And we've just slowly grown a big nightlife company over time. We've got a bar in Leeds. We have several nights in Leeds. We have stuff that we used to do in Sheffield, stuff we used to do in Manchester, and now Leeds and Newcastle are our two core bases. And it's shaped a lot of what I do. You know, you do things during your formative years, maybe at university and sort of teenage up into early 20s, and they really do sort of shape your thinking for a long time. So that was something that I did, and then went on Take Me Out, which is a British dating show, quite a fluffy one, I suppose, for the people who don't know. And then I did Love Island, which the Aussies should be a bit more familiar with.
Yeah.
And that was just chasing clout and a bit of a YOLO, so I decided to do that. But then thought, look, I'm not really fulfilling myself in the way that I thought I was going to. That is a problem. Problem requires solution, and the solution was do some self-inquiry, speak to some interesting people, and then the podcast came out of the back of that as, look, if I have a show, then I can force feed myself interesting people on a weekly cadence, and I also have a justification for making them talk to me. And yeah, 370 episodes and 25 million downloads later, we're here.
Yeah, and quite a feat as well, and very inspiring for a lot of podcasters out there or people who want to travel down that route, etc. I also think of it as you're almost creating your own MBA in some way. You expand your network in such a credible way, but also you just have this amalgamation, especially with a podcast like yours, where I wouldn't say it's specifically niched to a type of demographic, and I could be wrong here, but you speak to people from all walks of life. And that I find incredibly fascinating. And I wonder what that will do for you psychologically over time, not from just a contact basis in terms of building a network and being able to go, oh, actually, I've got it. There's a given subject or a problem. Let me email such and such. But also in terms of the way you think and articulate yourself.
Yeah, I get bored easy, man. You know, it's common advice in the creator industry to niche down. You know, you need to find a niche, you need to dominate the niche, and then you can broaden out from there. But that just didn't sound very interesting to me. So I decided to just speak to everyone. So from porn stars to psychologists, from astronauts to people that are trying to engineer human life to be able to survive flight in space and stuff. There's a broad range, and it just keeps things interesting. And yeah, you're right as well. It gives you different mental models. Because if you're constantly speaking to people about politics or sport or training or philosophy or psychology, they're going to have particular worldviews that are going to align because of the background that they have. And if you can spread that a little bit more broadly, it actually gives you a different perspective on a lot of different topics.
Correct. And speaking of which, one of the things I wanted to talk about that I'd love you to speak on first, because I think this is tremendously valuable for everyone, and we see eye to eye on this, is the word consistency. And it is a hidden ingredient in success. I think, you know, there's no one magic pill or magic bullet out there. And I think that can lead a lot of people astray. Sometimes we're always looking for what's the quick fix, what's the one thing that's going to get me to this goal. It's like, well, that's a that's a dangerous, slippery slope there. But consistency doesn't really get enough credit. And of course, it's not sexy. It's hard to sell, and it doesn't seem like something that's that important. But obviously, it's got you to where you are now, and it's why a lot of people achieve success. So I'd love you to just speak a little bit about that, whether it's from a personal standpoint or even, some of the guests you spoke about and why it's so important to be consistent in something that you're passionate about.
Well, far more people are talented or enthusiastic than are consistent overall. If you were to give me a single competitive advantage, I think consistency would win out, because everybody knows what it's like to pick up something new and find that they've got a natural knack for it, or pick up something new and find that they're enthusiastic. This is every January 1st in the gym. People decide they're going to start something. Maybe they do begin a new hobby or a training routine of some kind, and they enjoy it, but after time their consistency drops. If you were to look at the progress that the people make, it's not the ones that have talent or enthusiasm that make the most progress. It's the ones that are consistent. Now, talent and enthusiasm can facilitate consistency, but without consistency, it's basically pointless. It's all about iterations over and over and over again. You don't get to choose, you don't get to not make a habit. You simply get to choose what sort of habit you want to make. So you're constantly drilling something, whether that drill is getting up early or sleeping in, whether it's making your diet or breaking your diet, whether it's recording a podcast or not. All of these different habits are embedding the likelihood of you doing that thing again. Okay, so what route do I want to go down? I want to go down a route where I can do something over and over again, because presumably it'll get more easy as I do that. And specifically in the creator economy, like, it's everything. You do not get famous off the back of one video. And if you do, it's meme fame, and no one wants that. So the only way that you can make real impact is by finding something that you enjoy and doing it over and over again. And it's incredibly rare. You have to see consistency as a competitive advantage, because basically no one's doing it. As you said, it's not massively sexy. You can't quick sell a course off the back of it. The only people who do talk about it are usually not trying to flog you something, because consistency by its very nature just requires accountability and motivation. And that's quite hard to sell via a course as well. So when everybody's looking for a quick fix, it's the same with dieting, man. Like this sort of, whatever you want to call it, third wave dieting that we're seeing now with people like James Smith and the Fitness Chef and stuff like that. They're just telling people, look, it's watch your fucking calories. Do not eat too much. Make sure that you move as much as you can. That's it. And the same thing goes with if you want to be successful online. I think to get to 100,000 subs on YouTube, the average number of videos it takes is about 1,000. So people who've recorded 30 videos and are sad that they haven't got their plaque from YouTube yet, you think, well, all right, man, you're 3% of the way there. Like, let's kick it up a notch. And the same thing for podcasting. 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3, and of the 10% that do, 90% don't make it past episode 20. So by making it to episode 21, you're in the top percentile of all podcasters ever in history. Consistency wins.
And such an interesting, when you put it into a statistical framework and you use those metaphors and we break it down and people go, oh, okay, actually, maybe it's, it's like, well, yeah, start with the end in mind and sometimes work backwards and have these measurable and achievable goals. And like you mentioned with James Smith and a lot of other people in the fitness industry like myself. And again, there's this whole, people are focusing on not what they control all the time. It's always, what's out of my control. It's like, if you change that perspective, and again, it's almost, I think Jim Rohn, the late Jim Rohn, he said something where he talked about eating the apple daily. And it was this metaphor as well as, if you want, you can eat the apple daily, but it's not hard. Again, it's not tremendously great, but there is this whole benefit in just doing that one thing every day. And like you said, Chris, it might be, okay, I'm going to send an email to a podcast guest or something like that to line it up. Or it might be, I'm just going to track my calories today, or I'm going to do that extra press up, whatever it is. And there was a line, if you like, a quote, and I can't remember what podcast episode it was, but I was walking at the beach here. I was listening to it, and it was you and two of the guys. It's one of your episodes when you talk about life hacks. Again, I'm butchering it, but the one thing that hit me, because I'm a bit of a OCD overthinker, trying to just minutia. and I often invent things to do. And it was polishing things to perfection is a low level activity. And that
Low
really
leverage
hit.
activity. Yes.
Is that,
Yes.
yeah, sorry, I've got that.
Correct.
So that hit me in the face. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of me actually. And it was like, I think that was attached to like you used products and metaphors about shipping something and kind of getting it out there.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's this kind of whole concept of like you can get something really perfect, but you might just be wasting your time because it might not even be viable. And I've just gone, wow, yeah, I've wasted a lot of time doing that. And sometimes now it's just better to get it done and not overthink it and learn as you go. Yeah, of course, you don't want to go in recklessly, but you want to at some point have a go because, like you said, it's these iterations over time that craft it. And you know what? They make the good stories, right? They make the great learning. So I don't know if you wanted to tack onto that before we move on.
That's a Tiago Forte tweet that I saw, which was really, really smart and said, most people that are really successful, their work has a rough-edged, half-assed quality to it. And the reason is that polishing things to perfection is a low-leverage activity. And a lot of the time, people use that perfectionism trap as an excuse for not having to ship work at a rate that actually matters. So if you were producing things at a sufficiently quick rate, if you were iterating sufficiently quickly, you wouldn't be able to get it from 95 to 97% like perfect. You would get to whatever the minimum viable product is. And that varies for different people. Like I still, for my podcast, I don't ever edit any of the episodes, right? So I don't ever cut anything out unless it's a connection dropout or someone needs to take a bathroom break or something. So I don't chop out filler words. I don't chop out mistakes. I don't chop out anything. And the reason for that is that it holds me accountable. Plus, I don't actually think that the audience minds. My minimum viable product for a podcast does not involve chopping out ums and ers and pauses and stuff like that. So that's where I've got to, but it's meant that I can iterate more quickly. There are other people who have differing levels of their tolerances, and they can't. But yes, polishing things to perfection it's basically procrastination masquerading as high quality work.
That's good. I'll let that one sit for a little second for people to just maybe go back and let that sit. But it's true. And this whole like getting in our own way is within that, because people are, I mean, especially in this day and age, right, where there's a lot of people who we talk about success and the grind and all of this carry on. And it's almost like there's this expectation to be somebody or be something. And sometimes it's actually just about being happy, right? The best answer on what to do with your life yet is, I think, enjoy it. But people alluded with this putting the happiness on the horizon. And it kind of comes back to this inventing things to do. And I think COVID maybe has brought that back into perspective where people have gone, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't be putting these things off. And maybe I do need to pursue this. And we've seen a massive change in careers and everything that's shape shifting going on. So I think, with people who are, and I like to use the word inventing things to do, quite frankly, like you said, procrastinating to the point where you're not really getting anywhere. You're just sort of going around in circles. Now, I want to ask you about some specific questions before we move on to some topics that you mentioned before we hit record. Now, it's obviously unfair to ask, and I wouldn't do it to you because it's unfair when people ask me, what's your favorite podcast episode? You might have one, but fuck, man, that's a lot. And it's hard to really disseminate because it's quite subjective. So what I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the most valuable habits or takeaways or behaviors, if you will, that you've taken from guests and implemented, actually put into effect? So it wasn't, oh yeah, that sounds cool, that's great. It's, you know what, I heard it, I did it, I've implemented it, and fuck, you know what? This is the value I've got in my life. And it could be a handful, or I imagine whatever's been in the recent conversations, which is usually what gravitate to mind.
Cool. So first one would be stopping drinking morning coffee. I've replaced my morning coffee. I haven't had caffeine in 2021 because I'm hard as fuck. And I've replaced that with salt and lemon in water on a morning. And this is something that I first learned from Aubrey Marcus when he didn't actually talk about it on the episode, but I learned it during research for our episode with him a couple of years ago. And your adenosine system isn't active for the first 90 minutes of the day. Caffeine binds to the adenosine receptors. That's why you don't feel tired when you have caffeine. But your adenosine system isn't active for the first 90 minutes. Your adrenal system is, and salt acts on your adrenal system. So if you get up and you have a big glass of cold water with some lemon juice and some salt, just half a teaspoon of table salt is fine. Or Element are the sticks that I use. They're like rehydration salts. You can get them from anywhere on the internet. And they're great, man. Like, it's such a good way to start the day. You're going to have less caffeine throughout the day. And then when you finally do, if you are sticking to Caffeine Club, when you do have your first cup of coffee 90 minutes or 2 hours in, you're genuinely going to feel it. So a lot of the time what you're doing is you have your first one, you still feel tired, so you then have a second one, and all that you've done is increase your total caffeine consumption throughout the day. You haven't actually impacted how wakeful you are. And by increasing your caffeine consumption, it means that your tolerance goes up, which means that you need to have more caffeine to achieve the same level of awakeness. And the biggest coffee that many people have is the first one of the day. So push it back, salt and lemon in water, first thing in the morning, go for a walk, get some sunlight in your eyes. Your amygdala will be down regulated because you're walking. You've got what's called passive gaze as things go past your peripheral vision. And by the time 90 minutes in, you'll feel really good. And it's managed to get me from being like a classic caffeine user, coffee, knocko before training, and then maybe another coffee sort of mid-lunchtime to nothing this year. And I feel fine. I honestly felt absolutely great. So that was an interesting one. That's more, I guess, on the life hacksy side.
Yeah, that's fascinating though, actually, because I know a lot of people struggle with caffeine purely from the overconsumption perspective, as you've alluded to there. And I think, it is a drug, isn't it? At the end of the day, people go, "Oh, I'm not addicted to caffeine." I go, "All right, just go a week without it."
Well, no, you're not addicted. You're just dependent.
Yeah. It's this like it's a habit as well, isn't it? It's like that's what you do. It's like you get.
And they are as well. Like people get fucking withdrawal symptoms from caffeine, man.
Oh,
like I've never had it, and I was waiting for it. People were saying, "Oh, you'll get headaches," and some people talked about sort of sweating and shaking, sounded like a scene out of Train Spotting. But for me, it just never came. But I totally appreciate that. That's like a real outlier to not have that weaning off period where you do end up feeling a bit crap. But yeah, it's something that's worthwhile. I think that being dependent on any substance, anything, is generally a low sovereign activity. You know, if you need your phone to keep you stimulated, if you need alcohol to help you deal with bad situations during the day, if you need caffeine to make you feel excited for something, you should be cautious of that. That's taking away from your agency as a person. And even if it's not, I'm not moralizing this. I'm not saying that people that drink caffeine are less good than people that don't, or people that drink alcohol are less good than people that don't. My point is just, there's something beautiful about being a completely self-sustaining individual and reminding yourself that you've got agency. This year, I've made a joke about like, I'm hard as fuck, I'm not having caffeine. But the point is, I feel very much in control of my own physiology because there's nothing that's going in that gets me to the level where I'm happy with my performance. Now, I play around with nootropics, I play around with NMN and NAD and resveratrol and all sorts of other things, but I don't need any of them, and I don't need caffeine either, and I also don't need alcohol. I can take them into my life and take them out as much as I want, but it's on my terms, and that's something that is quite liberating for a lot of people to do.
Yeah, and I think that'd be great for a lot of the listeners to try as well, because as you said, being in control and not relying on external factors for motivation or stimulation is greatly powerful. And let's face it, as we said, most people are abusing caffeine and stimulants. I always go back to
it would be good to get it down, man. Regulate just a little bit, yeah.
Well, that's it. I'm not addicted to caffeine. I had it years ago where, and I say addicted, I used to meet people who were on 12 plus a day, double shots. I used to work in a cafe. And I had about probably maybe 3 coffees a day. And that's not a lot for some people. Like, oh, what, you soft? Anyway, but I was having that. And then I would have pre-workout. And I remember I'd be falling asleep in the gym, man. I'd be really tired. I couldn't figure out. My sleep was all right. I wasn't eating anything weird. And I spoke to one of the guys at the gym who was, quite intelligent, supposedly. And he said, what's your caffeine like? I said, I'm having this. He goes, oh, it could be that. You're a small bloke, and, it could affect you. And sure enough, it does. Caffeine just, I don't need much. And I had to wean myself off it. And I didn't get massive withdrawals, but there was some. And sure enough, I came off like 6 months. And now I just have 1 a day. As long as my sleep's good, it's perfect. And when I speak to clients and I say, hey, they want to do the training, they want to do the nutrition. I'm like, how's your sleep? I'm like, what? And I'm like, yeah, sleep. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, how, that's one of my questions. Like, how is your sleep? What's your average sleep? I've had Michael Grandin on the podcast. He's an associate of Matthew Walker. I want to get him on. He's belter. And it's just, we talk about consistency being an advantage. I say to people, man, if you want an advantage over 80, 90% of the population, get 8 to 9 hours of quality sleep a night. And I tell you what, you function like a bloody superhero. It just regulates everything. It is, I mean, again, it's a super great hack, and we're all guilty of it, sure. And it's not about every single night, because you've got to live your life, but it's just a massive impact. And this might lead on to the next point as well. So oxygen has been a big one for me, but this man here, and you know,
Gill.
oh yeah, you
Yes,
know.
yes.
So you actually got me onto Stu, all right? And I have a lot of clients with back pain, etc. And I had a look at it, and I not have a lot myself, but that has been a game changer, man. Like that has been a game changer.
What have you taken away from it?
So for me right now, I would say that back pain is individualized. It's not, again, it's not a magic pill. And it's about understanding the role of the spine and also the role of the core muscles. So I've never been a big believer of doing lots of abs. And I have to talk a lot of people out of doing loads of crunches and spinal flexion extension. But for years, I did a lot of these exercises wrong because no one taught me. So I'm now understanding how the spine is meant to be positioned with the rib cage under the pelvis and how to brace and isometrically train the core. And then obviously there's the big three. And then identifying and individualizing that to people and communicating it in a way that's simple has been, for me as a practitioner, just unbelievable, because most
He's the
people
best on the planet, man.
Yeah,
he's literally the best lower back specialist on the planet. So you
went to see him, right?
Correct. Yeah, I flew out to America, did a road trip, and then flew to Canada on my own. So I had him on the show, and then said, "Hey, Stu, I'm suffering with a little bit of back pain. Would you be able to do an assessment on me?" And this is after the podcast. He came, he really enjoyed it, and he basically said, "Fly out to see me 2 hours north of Toronto. We'll go fishing on my boat. If you can catch a fish, I'll do the assessment for free." And like, you're talking about like the number one back pain specialist on the planet. He gets flown by clients private all over the world to go and do assessments on them, professional athletes, celebrities, so on and so forth. And he's just this very simple Canadian fella that looks a bit like a lean Santa Claus with a huge mustache. And he was amazing, man. We've made a really good friendship. I flew out to see him. I met his wife. We walked the dog. We went out fishing. We went for a morning dip in his lake. And we keep in touch very regularly. And yeah, I mean, the stuff that he does, his work is phenomenal. If anyone wants to check out Back Mechanic, the book, it is. If you have back pain before considering surgery, like you gotta read that book. And he does which you may have seen, the sort of what's it called, placebo surgery, or the fake surgery, where what you noticed was that a lot of the recovery that people with back pain were getting post-surgery could be attributed to the hyper-controlled rest period, where they weren't actually doing anything debilitating to their backs, as opposed to structurally what had happened during the surgery itself. And that I've just before the podcast, I did my big 3. So that's still something every day that I try and get in compliance on that. I must have spent hundreds of hours in those positions, in each of his positions. I've done it on paddle boards. I've done it in America. I've done it in Ibiza. I've done it in Dubai. Like everywhere that I go, I'm big 3 all over the place. And it really is, if you're suffering with lower back pain, it's the first place to go.
Did you have it because of an injury, or was it just incorrect posture, things like that? You had an injury.
Yeah, so I'd had a couple of blowouts doing CrossFit, and they were probably fairly acute sort of disc herniations. So I've got L3 and S1 for me are slightly compressed. I've got a Schmoll's node, which is where a bit of disc material shoots up into the vertebral body itself, which is actually less uncomfortable than most people would think. But then you get edema, so you get bruising on the disc. It's just, spines are they're a pretty poor adaptation for high stress. And most people want to be both strong and flexible, and you don't really get to have both of those. You can have a stiff spine or you can have a flexible spine, but you don't get world champion powerlifters that are also yogis. and you don't get ballet dancers that can squat 200 kilos because the amount of bracing that you need is contrary to the amount of flexibility that you need. And again, that's an insight. People that do ROMWOD, I appreciate that it works for some people. I've shot for them. I'm really good friends with Daniel, the guy that owns it. But for me, it didn't help facilitate the sort of core that I needed. So I had to stop doing that. I had to stop doing yoga. I had to stop doing certain things and focus on core stiffening. So yeah, Stu McGill for the win for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't second that enough. For people who have got back pain, definitely check it out, and check out Chris's episode with him as well for a bit more of an insight. In terms of other takeaways, is there anything that you want to mention before we move on to the next set of topics?
Cool. Yeah. So Jordan Peterson, again, I did an episode with him, and during the prep for that, I came across my favorite rule that I think he didn't put in any of his books or in the original list of 42 on Quora. And it's don't practice what you don't want to become. And what that means is what we were saying at the start, that you don't get to not make a habit. You simply get to choose what habit you want to make. Every single action that you decide to take in life is contributing to you moving toward a particular type of future. You don't get to stand still. Standing still is still a choice. That's taking you toward the sort of standing still future. So don't practice what you don't want to become. It reminds us that the myelin sheaths, the way that our brains work in terms of habit setting, what is the sort of life that you want to have tomorrow? Okay, what are the actions that you're taking today that move you toward that? And I appreciate that this sort of, it gives quite a lot of stress to people because it constantly creates a delta between what you're doing and this idealized version of you and what you should be doing. So the implications of it can be seen as a little bit sort of grave or nihilistic or fatalistic, but it's not. It's just, look, when it comes to the things that really, really matter, commit to them, do them properly. How you do anything is how you do everything, stuff like that. Like, take care of the little things. And yeah, that was a really good lesson. Another one from Aubrey, I've got him on my mind because he's coming back on next week. Another one from Aubrey was, you don't serve people from your cup, you serve people from the saucer which overflows around your cup. And that is a reminder that we need to sort ourselves first, that trying to fix the world before we fixed ourselves, that's another Jordan Petersonism, right? Clean up your room. But more than that, that you can make other people happy by being happy yourself. Like, trying to make other people happy is a bit of a failed pursuit. The goal that you should aim for is to try and be a person that is happy, and other people should come along for the ride. Trying to look after other people before you've got... It's the same reason why when you're in an aircraft malfunction, like, you put your mask on first. Why? Because if you're suffocating, you are of no use to anybody around you, and there are people around you that need you. So sort your own shit. That's it.
Yeah. The whole serve yourself before you serve others has been, to put it in that context, revolutionary for me. I use the example and metaphor of, so you've got CPR. You know, if you've done your first aid, you know, right, there's a scenario, right, who are we going for first? And everyone goes, the casualty, and they go, no. And you're like, what do you mean? And then you go, the bystanders. And you go, no, it's you. And it's that same concept. And you're like, well, hang on. But it's so true. And I think females struggle with this a lot, being with that feminine energy and care. And they're always give. But it's like, but if you don't serve yourself first and fill up your own cup, you can't then fill up the cup of others. And that seems like a backward concept. But why is that? That is maybe because of society and the way it's gone. It's always, you know, do this and do that. And then, yeah, you end up just being very drained yourself rather than moving forward from that point. I wanted to ask as well, I wanted to actually go back. I want to sort of segue a little bit, and I want to go back to the nightclub thing a little bit. And I want to ask what experiences or what lessons you've taken out of running nightclubs, because I mean, that in and of itself produces probably some interesting experiences and stories. When you were running these nightclubs, and obviously it's at a point now, you said Newcastle's the top one, and what was the other one that was your main? And Leeds. Were you ever like in there doing everything, wearing all the hats, or is it always sort of a more overseeing eye, if you will, rather than being sort of hands-on, etc.? And are you sort of now still dealing with the day-to-day run-ins, or have you got sort of obviously staff and people at every level to do that for you?
Yeah, so when I first started, it was very much a classic young person running a business. Just did everything, was far too overzealous, over controlling, was terrified about relinquishing control. It was my baby, it was my income with my business partner, but he was the same as me, so we just made each other worse. And it takes a lot of sort of bravery to be able to step back from that, to know, look, my time, the only way that I can grow this business is by actually starting to delegate, starting to relinquish some control, by having faith in the people that are coming up underneath me. But it took a long time. So for a very long time, I did 204 Saturdays in a row at the same event. I didn't miss a single one. I was taking holidays for 4 days at a time, from Sunday until Thursday, so that I would be back ready for the Saturday. The only reason that I did Take Me Out was because they promised me that they could get me back in Newcastle by 10 p.m. on Saturday night. So I did Take Me Out from whatever, Tuesday or Wednesday, straight through, back to back to back to back to back. Flew back from the Isle of Fernandos on the Saturday morning, and then landed at London and got a train up, and just about arrived ready to go to work. So those were that was the level of neuroticism that I had. I was so focused on the success of the business, and a lot of my self-worth was attached to that success as well. So if the business did well, I felt like I was worthwhile. If the business did badly, I felt like it was some sort of a comment on me as a person. Remembering that you only have a really negligible impact on the performance of the business. The market doesn't give a single shit about you. It doesn't care how hard you've worked. There are all sorts of market forces. You can have been the best club promoter in the world, and then COVID-19 comes along. Your nightclubs are now not only empty, but also shut. All right, is that because you didn't do the work? No, obviously. So yeah, that was a big realization, man. Like, stepping back, giving myself license to say you are more than the performance of your business is a really big one. And over time, yes, we've scaled a team. I've learned to relinquish control a lot. I'm still involved, but it's much more of an advisory role now, basically consulting for my own business, where I step in, there's problems, there's branding, there's, we have meetings with new venues. So you have the gravitas and the clout where you walk into a meeting and the other directors know who you are because you're the guy that's on the same level as them, which is a useful position to be in. But I don't work the nights anymore. I haven't worked a night other than cover. I haven't scheduled a night to work in since before COVID. And it's good, man. It's a very unique insight into human nature, working nightlife. But a lot of the lessons that I took out of it, they're just common. Everything there is what every small business person has to deal with. Whether you own a hairdresser's or a deli or a coffee shop or a skate park or whatever it is, all of these different things, it's the same challenges. Here's some lessons, actually. Some lessons that I think pretty much every young business person needs to remember. You're almost definitely undercharging for your product. I don't know what you sell. I don't know who you are. I don't know your industry. I don't know the market. I don't know your competitors. But I can guarantee you that you're probably undervaluing the product that you're putting out there, and you're terrified of putting the price up because you think that if you're going to put the price up that everybody's going to leave. But it's not true.
Love that.
So that's a first one to take on, and it's so common. It's so common. The second one is delegating control. Yes, it is scary, but you have to remember you can only do what are the tasks that only you can do? What are the things that only you can bring to the business? How can you get other people in that can do things that they can do as well? So for years, I did all of the social media scheduling. There was a period, man, where I was doing four or five events a week of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram scheduling across all of them, across multiple posts per day. You're talking hundreds of social media posts a week. But I was terrified that if I outsource that to somebody else, and then over time people start to expect that from you. So if you decide that you're going to actually take a bit of a step back, the other people in the business go, hang on a second, you used to do this much work, now you do this much work. And you go, well yeah, because I've made this situation for myself. So learn to relinquish control and put your price up. Those are two lessons that probably everyone needs to know.
Yeah, I like it. That's great. And for people listening, you need to hear it. And it's so true. They resonate greatly. Where do you think the future is for nightclubs? Being obviously involved yourself, but also now with the current surroundings, where do you see that going?
I think we'll have a good few years coming up, at least in the UK. I can only speak to my local market, right? I don't know globally what's going to happen. It doesn't really matter globally what's going to happen, to be honest. Everyone's now very much localized. Australia's situation is very different to the UK at the moment. Yeah, if you keep people, 18-year-olds, locked in their house, they're going to develop some habits which I think are actually going to be quite antisocial. It's going to take us a little bit of time to speed them back up, to get them back into the nightlife routine. But I also think that if I was 17, if I'd entered COVID at 17 and left it at 19 and never got to go to a nightclub and stand up straight, if I'd had to sit down in every nightclub for all of the year that I was 18, I would be chomping at the bit, ready to go. And I think that we're going to see a good few years of trade. We're looking at a lot of investment of money into venues. A lot of clubs and bars and restaurants are seeing that this is an opportunity for food and beverage units to really, really make a change and to try and capture some more of the market, which is exciting for us because we get more different, new, high-status venues that we can work with. And yeah, it should be fine. I don't think that we've got anything to worry about. I'm not sure if the Roaring Twenties sort of news stories that we saw are actually going to come about, but it's definitely going to be an all right few years.
It's going to be. Just a quick one, guys, before we carry on with the podcast. For any of you who are interested in taking your health and physique to the next level and you want to remove the guesswork, you're not quite getting the progress that you want, you're not seeing what you want to see in the mirror, and you're not feeling like you're really moving in the right direction, then click the link in the bio below, the apply button, where you can contact me. We can organize a free consultation, no obligation, and discover whether it's a good fit as coach and client. All right, back to it. It's going to be an interesting time when the bottle's off the, finally off, if you will, and people are allowed to come back out. I think we'll see a bit of an uprise as well. And on that topic of communication, one of the things we mentioned as well before starting was young people, communication, dating in the 21st century now. You put a quote or part of a snippet, if you will, on your story, which was talking about how most people now, or there's a sort of say not most people, there's a small percentage, I think it was 17% of people that approach others are perceived to be harassment by younger people, I think it was. And again, I've rearranged that. But this is something I'm incredibly passionate about. The reason being is I'm a single man and I'm outgoing and I like to approach people, whether that's an agenda or not. And I find that it has now become a minority. A lot of people are very sort of like, oh, who are you? If you're not in the social circle, there's no particular reason for you to talk to someone. People are a lot more closed off. Now, obviously, depending on where you're around the world, there's lots of cultural elements that contribute to that. There's sort of cultures, say, that are a little bit more reserved. I'm thinking sort of more like the Scandinavian countries and maybe even here in Australia. Even though people are sort of friendly, there's still that little bit of, how you doing? Versus, say, you got like the Latin cultures and people are very touchy-feely and out there, and that's kind of what you do. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit based on the conversations that you've had on recent events and what your thought process is, again, from your experience and now sort of from being a younger person, even through that nightclub era and seeing what that was like to obviously where we are now.
Yeah, the dating market's wrecked at the moment, as far as I can see. It's in a very difficult place. You have some absolutely perfectly justifiable changes that have occurred to call men to account for reprehensible things that they've done. Men in positions of power like Harvey Weinstein that have utilized that to manipulate women into sex and then to forcibly manipulate women into sex as well, which is terrible. And there needed to be a reckoning around that. But what that's left is a vacuum for positive masculinity. I don't think that there's a particularly good role model now for what it means to be a man. Throwing toxic masculinity around whenever you talk about anything which is typically masculine leads men to not really know what they're supposed to do. Like, by our very nature, we model ourselves off other people. We want to have role models and archetypes that we can follow up with. When you're being told that everything that your parents were able to tell you, that your father was able to tell you, that your older brothers were able to tell you, that society for a very long time and culture's been able to tell you is all deplorable, it leaves a vast delta there. And the problem is that women also, on average, want a man that has a masculine energy. This is why there is a masculine and feminine energy. You can't have a relationship that doesn't have polarity in there. Now, the masculine energy can actually come from the woman sometimes. On average, not so much, but it can come from them. And the feminine energy can come from the man. But the reason that attraction occurs is because of that polarity and that pull between the two. So one of the situations that you see with this is society's tried to nerf and put comfort blankets over anything that might be potentially uncomfortable. And one of these things is that some women feel uncomfortable or have been harassed by men. Again, totally deplorable. However, if you roll that out across the board, you now have this statistic where 17% of young people think that approaching anyone in public that you might want to date constitutes harassment. But 90% of women want the man to make the first move and approach first. So you have a conflicting set of principles here. You think, okay, well, what does this end up with? If you have a world in which no woman ever is made to feel uncomfortable by a man coming up and approaching them, the only way that that can happen is if no man ever approaches a woman, and that means that 90% of women are not going to be happy with things. There's no simple solution to this. I think that a healthy understanding that moderate amounts of discomfort are a part and parcel of life. Like, you do not want to get it to the stage where no one's trying to apologize for awful, ridiculous, despicable men and their behavior here, but we're also not wanting to have a world in which you stop fundamental processes from occurring. You know, you've seen this consent porn before, where can I touch you here, and now can I touch you here, and now can I touch you here. It's inherently ridiculous because everybody understands that part of the excitement of being intimate with someone is the ignorance. It's not knowing what's happening next, and it's sort of the game and the excitement and the romance. Like, that's what it comes from. But when you remove that from the situation by its very nature, a lot of the excitement goes. And over time, we're seeing some challenges with that. We're seeing challenges. I just found out today that within the next decade, it looks like in America, women are going to outnumber men in college 2-1. So you're going to have twice as many women as there are men in college. And this is terrible for women's dating standards, because they need, on average, women prefer to date men that are more educated than they are. They prefer to date men that are more intelligent, that have more resources and more status, on average. There are very many women out there who are incredibly successful and are happy to have a blue-collar working husband, and I'm sure that they will have fantastic, successful relationships. But on average, most women want a man that is higher in status, higher with resources, and more educated than them. And as you have an ever-increasing pool of women, high-performing women, again, rightly so, they should be able to go and do whatever they want. They should be as educated as they want. They should have as much access to rise up the totem pole as they want. But inevitably, when their fundamental desire is to be attracted to a man who is more successful than they are, and on average, more women become more successful than men, you have an ever-increasing pool of women competing for an ever-decreasing pool of high-performing men, which is not good for women. And there's no simple solution to this. Who would have known that giving women increased access to education and work would have resulted in hurting women's dating chances long-term?
Yes.
If you are a high-performing woman, you are making yourself basically the tall friend that can only date NBA players now, because you are so high up the hierarchy that you think, right, okay, I need to, don't settle. You've got this sort of be a boss bitch, clap back, don't settle for anything less than you deserve. You have all of these ideologies, and you see how they start to coalesce, but they don't fit together. They bounce off each other. And this is one of the things where there will be a crisis of dating at the moment, and I think it's undergirded by this crisis of masculinity. I think that quite rightly we needed to facilitate women's access to education and to employment, and to empower them to be able to go and get what they want and do what they want. But if it's at the cost of men being able to be there as a provider, as a resource acquirer, typically for the relationship, it leaves women in a very uncomfortable situation, especially the high-performing ones. So you go, well, where are all the good men at? It's like, well, they're being firefighters and loggers and checkout operators, like blue-collar jobs, which are stable and fundamental, but now don't look tremendously impressive if you've got an MBA and earn $250,000 a year as a woman. Here's another stat. So in relationships where the woman out earns the man, divorce is increased by 50%, and the likelihood that the man needs to use Viagra is increased by 25%. That's a statistically significant
It's an
impact.
It's an interesting.
Yeah, but it's a difficult one, man. Like these dating dynamics come about because you have a very quickly moving set of identities that do not match up with fundamentally what we desire. Here's a final thing. Just I need to try and explain this. There is a difference between a desire and the expression of that desire. So you as a man can find every woman attractive, but it's probably inadvisable to gawk at every woman as they go past. So men are wired to find many women attractive. You can look at a set of rocks that look like boobs and get ever so slightly turned on and be like, that kind of looks like boobs. Like, you're not objectifying the rock, you're not utilizing your toxic male gaze on the rock, but men are wired to find things that look remotely sexually attractive. Yes, we absolutely should look at reducing the expression of that. If you're a girl that's training in the gym and there's a guy who just will not stop staring at you, quite rightly, that makes you uncomfortable. But the same thing happens for women. Like, you can try and restrict the expression of the desire to date up and across to find a man that is more fundamentally better educated, higher status, or more resources than you, but it's going to be very difficult to stop the desire itself. Now, you can manipulate the expression, and what it seems to me is that trying to make the world a very fluffy, comfortable place where no one's ever made to feel uncomfortable has led to situations where if we're able to stop the expression of the desire, it's almost like we've got rid of the desire itself. And nobody remembers that the underlying principle of the desire, of the fact that men signal attraction off youth and fertility, and women signal attraction off status and resources. You can repurpose the world in whatever way you want, but evolution's going to take a very long time to catch up to that. So, yeah, there's some thoughts.
Yeah, and definitely thoughts to ponder on as well, because it's such an interesting, thought-provoking topic. It's wildly complex. It's wildly fleeting as well, in my opinion, vastly undulating. And with the whole dynamic of this is what women want, this is what men want, but then when they do it and they go, oh, that wasn't actually what we thought we wanted, or that didn't get the desired result. I think Mark Manson writes very well. And again, whether that now is changing, when he talks about models, and I've had a few great, amazing dating coaches on here, and I've read a lot of the books over the years. And, that was one of the books which succinctly kind of got into it as well. And he sort of like takes all the fluff out of it in terms of just keeping it simple and like polarizing and whatnot. It's like, well, you're not going to please everyone, and everyone says you can pick up any woman or any man. It's not. But then now we've got this sort of melting pot of now people, it's almost like straight, I made this post the other day, and, it was a bit funny. It was designed to spike a bit of emotion. And one of the things I said was, remember the days when, and I had these bullet points. And one of them was when straight was not weird or not, it was normal. And this one of my older friends, he went, what do you mean? And I said, well, think about it. It's most people are like someone's marrying a lampshade, or they're unidentifiable these days, or and whatever you want to go with it. I'm happy. I'm not someone who says, you have to do this, but there's so many categories now. And I'll use diets to kind of emphasize that metaphor where, now people say, oh, I'm keto, or, I'm pescatarian, or I'm this, or I'm that. And it's like, well, you have to put yourself in a box with it. And why are you identifying with that? Because that's part of the thing, right? So if we belong in this community, this is what we do, we're superior. It's like, well, you're not. Maybe you just need a place to belong. And that can kind of go off in other areas. But I do think that has something to do with it. And that's back to that masculine and feminine energy, like you said. There's a few great books that talk about that, and men maybe just being over, they can't show any emotion. But it's like, well, vulnerability at the pinnacle is one of the key things for attraction. To create that connection, you've got to be vulnerable. So yeah, wildly fascinating thoughts there, Chris. To move on before we wrap up on rapid fire, and a couple of final questions I have, which I ask all my guests. You mentioned as well, and I will bring this up because it is something I'm passionate about, and there was a few recent good podcasts that you did, and we talk about the existential, crisis, if you like, the state of the world, what's happening to the world. And there's a lot of very intelligent people. I think David Sinclair is one of them from like the geneticist standpoint. He's from Australia, great guy. I forget the name of the gentleman you had on, and he was talking about, he'd written a book, I think it was predicting what would happen and like moving to another planet. I listened to that the other day. So I don't know if you want to kind of speak on that and bring that broad term up in terms of, we're looking at the future, and we often forget that, without being pessimistic, that things do have a date, and the world is moving very fast, but where to next? And I remember an old biology teacher of mine, and we were talking about, we got onto food, and he said, I don't know what it was. And he goes, have you guys ever tried snake? And we went, what do you mean? He goes, like from the Amazon. I said, no. He goes, I've tried tiger, I've tried this. And we were like, what's this got to do with anything? He goes, well, think about this. And he asked us a question. He goes, what's your favorite meat? Who's beef? Right, chicken. Right. He goes, right, that animal's killed. What's next? And you keep weaning it down. And he goes, what's next? Right. But your condition.
Eventually you get to snake.
Yeah, exactly. You get to it. So he goes, I didn't go out of my way to kill it. He goes, but through my travels, and he was a very well-traveled man. He goes, I tried it, but he goes, but what if, and not if, but when, what is that sort of next evolution? And I guess what is the next evolution on Earth as well, despite that we may not see it in our specific generation, but it is very thought-provoking. So maybe if you want to share some ideas around that.
Yeah, man. So existential risk is a huge closet obsession of mine, which is all the different ways that we could go extinct as a civilization. And yeah, so my main sort of thought process about it at the moment is that Extinction Rebellion, who are causing all sorts of havoc in the UK at the moment, are focused very narrowly on the extinction of the human race and a lot of species, but the only way that they are concerned about that happening is climate change. Whereas if you look at the data around what the biggest risks are existentially, artificial general intelligence is 1 in 30 over the next 100 years. Engineered pandemics is 1 in 30. Natural pandemics is 1 in 1,000. Nanotechnology is 1 in 10,000. Climate change is like 1 in 50,000 over the next 100 years, as it being the reason that we could go extinct. That's not to say that we don't need to focus on it, blah, blah, blah. But it's so short-sighted. Like, there is no Greta Thunberg for the control problem for artificial general intelligence. Like, if you get a super intelligent AGI and you give it slightly wrong objectives, the entire universe gets turned into paper clips or cheeseburgers or fucking paper or something. Like, you're wrecked. You're wrecked. Like, this is what the Terminator is, but it's just a little bit less sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger-y. And moving forward, I have no idea. It's so messy at the moment. And to bring it back to the identity politics stuff that we were talking about, I'm concerned that the smartest minds of our generation are having their time taken up debating about whether men are men or women are women or not. This is not a good use of the time of some of the people that are really, really clever. James Lindsay is this guy who's got a pure PhD in mathematics, and he has dedicated, as far as I can see, like the last 3 years to blogging about critical race theory, and he does it very well, and he is a foremost understanding of the Frankfurt School and the Foucault and Derrida and all of the people that sort of have created this postmodern movement at the moment. But you think, dude, like, pure mathematics. You should be getting us to Mars, not debating about penises. And yeah, there's a lot of concerns. I mean, the threat of China is terrifying. I'm trying to get into that. I'm trying to learn a little bit more about that. The threat of Russia is also not very fantastic. China's militarization of the South China Sea. There's a lot of different ways that everything could be ruined. Like, so many ways that things could be ruined. And I'm really concerned that people are getting distracted by outrageous but nonsensical and not important issues. And my concern is that if you roll that forward over time, as Douglas Murray says, when the barbarians are at the door, we'll be debating about what gender they are. That, look, there are real problems out there. There are genuine concerns. We've just come out the back of a huge pandemic. Well, not if you're in Australia, but in the UK. And you think, if that wasn't a wake-up call for people to say, look, focus on the things that matter. Stop debating about stupid stuff. And I see it in myself. I find myself bringing it up because it's so obviously outrageous to... I was on GB News a couple of weeks ago, and there was genuinely a segment on there talking about a TikTok person who'd said that using the word curry is racist. And I thought, well, first off, that quite rightly, that's ridiculous. Secondly, if you don't respond to it, you cede ground to these ridiculous ideas. But thirdly, you take up time. This was 4:30 p.m. on television on a news station for 10 minutes with me and Andrew Doyle, who's really smart, and a guy called Scott Capuro sat next to me, talking about whether curry's racist. So all the people in that situation, all of the different compulsions, first off, it should have never been said in the first place. It's ridiculous. Secondly, you have this desire to fix it because you think if we cede ground to this, then it's going to get more, it's going to take up more of the public consciousness. But then thirdly, you actually do it and you feel disgusted at yourself for having wasted your time debating something which is so obviously ridiculous. It's patently stupid. And yet, this entire cycle is self-perpetuating. Something ridiculous happens. Reactionary people decide to try and bat it down so that it doesn't take hold in the culture, but it takes up their time from working on something that could actually progress the culture, and then another ridiculous thing happens. And that cycle is just very self-perpetuating. Look at anybody on the right at the moment. You know, your Ben Shapiro's, your Matt Walsh's, your Douglas Murray's even, who's been on my show a ton of times. When Douglas comes on, I want to bring up the ridiculous things that I've seen. Hey, tell me about what have we learned from J.K. Rowling this year and about how she's been accused of being all of these things. And I find myself getting seduced by it. And I think, look, I there's no breakwater here. There's no way to throw some sort of patent interruption to stop people from doing it, because for as long as there are ridiculous stories, there will be people that will react to them. And the number of ridiculous stories seems to be increasing at the moment. So, yeah, I don't know how to move forward, but I know that the implications are grave. I know that we need to focus on things that genuinely matter more. Giving people perspective is very hard, and I might have thought that COVID would have reset our values a little bit and made us realize just how crucial and how tentative and how precarious our grasp on humanity genuinely is. But no joy with that, apparently. We have all managed to go back to debating whether the word curry is racist pretty quickly. So maybe we're doomed. Fuck it. Maybe we'll just TikTok our way into extinction. I don't know.
Maybe. And people ask me why I don't own a TV or watch their news. or for that matter, on TikTok. So that leads me to ask this, because this is going to lead on to some interesting statements, which I read from apparently a classified book. But what's your thoughts on extraterrestrials and aliens? Something foreign to our being, based on the conversations you've had and your articulation of thoughts now with what you can put together. Because you spoke to a lot of people from different fields. You probably now can sort of put those ingredients in a pot, stir it up, come out with a different sort of, I
would say it's probably pretty unlikely that that we're the only life in the observable universe. I would say it's maybe not certain that that there's other life in the galaxy. And as of yet, I'm not convinced that aliens have visited Earth. The Tic Tac videos and the Commander Fravor and the stories from Area 51, they're compelling, but they're just not quite, they haven't met my threshold for believability just yet. Realistically, it seems very likely that we're probably not alone in the universe, but we very well could be alone in the galaxy. That's some thoughts.
It is. It's a double-edged sword, and it's nice to, again, it's a seductive thought. It's something to play around with. But and now you would think, well, it's the perfect time, because with all of social media, we could say, well, we should see them because we have all this technology. But then again, you could say, yeah, but because we have all this technology, maybe we don't, because it's so easy to make videos and change things and Photoshop and all of these wonderful things that we have. But ultimately, there was something that was sent to me, and my friend said, look, you can download, it's meant to be this classified USSR book. But anyway, regardless of what it is, it was fascinating. And I take everything with a grain of salt. And it had these breakdowns of apparently, different extraterrestrials, their archetypes, what they were, and all of this. Anyway, the most fascinating thing about the whole document was at the end, it had these statements of apparently what aliens had said. And I thought, well, regardless of who'd written this, there was something that was absolutely gold in there. And it it signifies more now than it did back then. And you just touched on it there. And in a word, it was, the human race is divided by all of these religions and all of these beliefs. And ultimately, it's all, at the end of the day, it's minutia, pretty much, is what it was saying. It says, if humans continue to divide themselves, they will destroy the earth. If they actually unified and then decided to go, right, what do we actually need to do as a greater race? Like, what's important, right? Without all of the distractions, one, the statement was you would find extraterrestrial life and see it, because it's like stargazing. Everyone's too busy on the phone, and everyone's plugged in. I always say people are hooked up to the matrix. And yeah, you got to play the game, but you got to unplug, man. And people, are just in that habitual, and you talked about it before, you're in this habit, you're going with the current, you don't realize it. And next minute, you've lost 2 hours scrolling on TikTok or whatever it is. And then people wonder why they don't get things done or pursue their passions. But I just thought, regardless of that, that's a very interesting concept. I'm not a religious man. I like to listen. I like to learn. I've spoken to a lot of people from different cultures and different religions. And I like to question things, and I like to think and sit and ponder on it. And I think oftentimes, again, it's one of those many distractions that we have. And as you said, Chris, we've got a lot of smart people being distracted by a lot of very unintelligent things. And I just wonder, again, maybe it's not possible, for all of us to focus that energy on that one thing or whatever is productive. But I do wonder what would come of it if we removed a lot of these distractions and a lot of this waste. But it seems that maybe it's implanted for a specific reason. I feel like, the society puts TVs and all of this out for a reason. It's like, people are just eating their daily shit and they're like hooked up into it. And I mean, I even get a bit weird when I go to this. You probably got them in England, the self checkouts, obviously. If anything, you probably got something more advanced. And I often just stand there and I go, ants. We're all ants. We're just scanning the thing, wearing the mask. And I almost get a little bit...
What does everyone else turn around and say when you're shouting at them about accusing people of being ants as they're trying to scan their shopping?
Call
quietly?
me a madman.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is happening in my head. But I fortunately, right, it's when you start answering yourself back, that's when you're going to get worried. But I do. I sort of have these thoughts and I'm like, I almost get mad about it, but maybe that's my own problem with authority. I don't know, but I just have this sort of like, people don't question things anymore. People should, it's not about being necessarily rebellious, but it's about having a bit of critical thinking, to say the least.
Against the self-service checkouts.
Well, mate, who knows what information?
The tyranny of a self-service checkout cannot be understated. I'm all for it, man. Fuck him. Let's go to war. Yeah, but you are right. Like the only way, realistically, I think that the human civilization can reach where it needs to is with global coordination, and that's not going to happen. You know, for as long as you have the way that the world is set up at the moment, and this is why a different way of piecing together 1984 genuinely might be the only way that you actually get the human race to survive. Where you have this crazy totalitarian government. Okay, so here's a thought experiment, which I've never done before, so it might be totally off the mark.
Does it involve self-checkouts?
Yeah, no, it does not. Is it better for the human race to go extinct with individual nation states staying as they are, or to get past the precipice to become a multi-planetary species under a totalitarian dictatorship to then liberate themselves again? It would require maybe, let's say, 2,000 years of, maybe a bit more, maybe 2,000 years of humans being basically under the boot of a guy that tells you exactly what you're supposed to do. Very regimented, very limited freedoms and liberations. But it means that the human race actually gets to continue. You've now colonized Mars and some other exoplanets. Maybe you've got some of Saturn's moons. And now, once you've got yourself out the back of that, you're able to... You've hedged your bets about humanity going extinct to the extent where you can relinquish democratic ideals and people can kind of become more sovereign individuals with liberation and things like that. And I don't really know where I stand on that. I think that I would probably err on the side of like give me the survival and just make a few millennia of people have a bit more of a shittier time, because the same way as certain soldiers go to war, they pay a price in order for the freedom and the liberation of people that come after them and people that live that aren't there The only difference between you going to war and changing geographical position and me going to war by being under a totalitarian government and temporally, i.e. in the future, somebody else being able to have their liberation, it's just a difference in kind, not a difference of degree, not a difference of kind. And yeah, I don't know, man. Global coordination it's a huge problem. I don't know whether we can do it. It doesn't really seem like we can. And if we don't get it right, all of this is going to be for nothing. All of the ecological arguments, all of the concerns about gendered bathrooms and women's rights and football and body fat and everything becomes pointless. There is essentially an unlimited number of human lives that can come after us. And if we don't get it right, then none of them get to live. So for all that we should be concerned about the damage that we're doing right now, we should be far more concerned about ensuring our potential as we go forward. Dangerous times.
Dangerous times indeed. And that perspective, and I cannot remember the podcast that I heard this on. I can't remember who it was, but it's something I've adopted. It's a mindset, it's a statement, if you will. Because like you said, it could be, oh, okay, well, maybe we sacrifice generations to get to a better place, or, we sort of think, well, it's short-lived. It's not going to be me. It's going to be the next 2-3 generations, or then vice versa. Well, I don't care. This is my generation. I'll do what I want. Fuck it. Someone will save it, right? And that's almost like you can put that down and like, oh, there's a piece of paper there. Someone else will pick it up. Yeah, but maybe they won't, And it was this statement where, like, at the end of the day, we're all going to be dead. Like, spoiler alert. But what does it mean? So what this whole thing, like in the greater ecosystem, in the greater global system, like your role, like, is it a role? Have you got a meaning? What do you want to do? Again, it comes back to like enjoying it. Like, what if this is all a gift? Like, what if, we follow some of the theories where maybe are we plugged into AI or this? I mean, I don't think so personally, but, at this point, who knows? Are we in a petri dish of many with a greater, energy or emphasis or gods or whatever you want to call them, a greater life form facilitating all of this. So it's very, very thought provoking. It can get sort of, the word I'm looking for is, it's like an enigma. It can just keep going and going and going. But I think to kind of sometimes give yourself a daily dose of reality, or kind of bring it into perspective, is like, ultimately, it is going to be over no matter whatever we're in, whether it's a simulation or real. So what are you doing right now? And are you at least fucking happy? Like, like, are you moving in that direction? So like you said, I don't know if it is possible as well, but it's, it definitely provides a lot of conversation. That's for sure. And before we wind out, and I appreciate your time, Chris, and I appreciate you sharing, especially with the segments of the guests that you've had on. These questions are rapid fire. They're a bit more fun in nature before my final one. And the first one I'll ask is probably more relevant to our situation, which is, if you could wake up anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be and why?
Say Austin, Texas, because I've got a ton of buddies that have just moved there, spent a lot of time over the last 18 months in this room doing work, and it'd be nice to just chill out with some of the boys. So I think, head over there.
That's a bit of a happening place now, isn't it? At the minute, that's where Joe Rogan's gone.
Correct.
Yeah. Funnily enough, that's where Chris, my friend who's an epidemiologist, is going to as well. He goes, that's where I'm fucking off to. I said, why? He goes, trust me, it's a place to be. So interesting. My second one would be, if you could choose any superpower, including one you can make up, what would it be and why?
Never need to sleep, man. That's a superpower that no one realized that they wanted, but actually everybody does.
It's actually, that's bang on, man.
It's so realistic that you could imagine someone getting it. Flying would be great, and then being invisible would be great, and living for 1,000 years would be great, but they're probably a bit of a way off. Never needing to sleep.
Yeah, you're thinking, see? Yeah. Logical. Well, apparently it was that woman years ago who used to do, was it 3 days on, up completely, and then 1 complete day of sleep? It was, I think that was when I was in the UK. It was many years ago now. I don't know if she's still doing it, but yeah, that was her routine, and she reckons it was brilliant because she could get more done. Who knows?
I've tried to do. I've had some days where I've been awake for So 26 hours, and it's like a hellscape. Those last few hours, it's so brutal. Trying to stay awake for more than a full day is incredibly difficult. But there are some people that have a genetic mutation where they actually only need about 4 hours or so, 4 to 5 hours a night. But for the people that think that's an excuse for them to not sleep very much, the chance of you having that mutation is the exact same as you being hit by lightning twice. So it's quite low. You probably just need to get some more sleep, realistically.
Because everyone goes, oh, that's me.
Yeah, no.
That was one of my favorite parts of Matthew Walker's book, actually. Do you know what, though? I actually know someone. I actually legit know someone who does that. He's a trainer. And I asked him his hours, and he told me, and I've been like, okay. And I looked at him, and I'm like, he doesn't, no bags under his eyes. He's not tired. He's healthy body composition. And over time, I'd see him, and I'm like, he's actually doing this. He's actually getting. And I said, like, what's your average sleep? And he goes, 3 to 4 hours. He's quite a genuine bloke. And I just thought, and he doesn't know about this. And I told him to read the book, actually. He got it. And I thought, you're one of them fuckers. You've got to be, because you don't even seem to. He's not like, he's not having loads of coffee. He's not having, like, he doesn't even look tired, man. I'm like, what the fuck? You know, but.
He's got my superpower.
Literally. I can say, look, there's a fella. But then who knows what the side effects are, if any. Which is true. The last one might be quite challenging for you, considering the amount of people and conversations you've had. And I'll open this up for you now. I'll give you 5. I usually give people 3. You can invite 5 people round to dinner, dead or alive. This will change the more you think about it, I imagine. But off the top of your head now, who would you have round for dinner?
My granddad, that I never met. Probably Daniel Sloss, who's a buddy of mine. He's a Netflix special comedian, Scottish guy.
He's funny.
He's a very, very good guy. Sam Harris, because I need to meet him. Rogan, so that I could step out of the conversation and he could take over. Who else have I been interested in? Kanye West.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Just as a wild card. Yeah. So, Grandad, people always say, like, if you could meet one person dead or alive, who would it be? And one of my buddies gave this answer on a podcast, and he said, I'd meet Grandad or great granddad, because the amount that you're going to learn from that person is so much greater than some random human that you're not connected to, but just happens to be interesting. And I thought it was such a compelling answer. It's such a smart thing to say. And I've adopted that as my own. Yeah, like, you know, granddads and great granddads, and you'd see bits of yourself in them and work out, you know, get to hear your family story, especially people that you never got to meet or speak to. Pretty cool idea.
Yeah, I like that, actually. I'm probably going to steal that for myself too. Because that'd be great. Just to see someone like 10 generations back even and be like, ooh, fuck. That's where I got it from.
Yeah, exactly.
Or not. Which is interesting. The last rapid fire one is, well, actually, we'll save that to the end. But the more serious question is, can you identify a fear that you've had in your life? Could be past, could be current, what it was, what you learned from it, or if it is current, what you are learning from this fear. Could be something small, could be something big, could be anything.
Definitely had a fear about public speaking for a long time. Getting up on stage and giving a talk, and then I did a TEDx talk earlier on this year, which kind of forced me to get around that, and worked with a speech and a performance coach. And I think that just stems from a desire to be liked. You want people to get the impression that you're competent and capable, and not having that self-confidence is something that undermines it. And yeah, it's kind of like learning to fight or something. It's one of those fundamental skills that I think that pretty much everybody needs to learn at some point. If you can fight, if you know that you can handle yourself, then there is a degree of confidence that you have as you walk around, because there is an undertone of potential physicality in pretty much everything that you do. And I feel like public speaking is an equivalent, because there are echoes of public speaking in pretty much everything that you do. You need to talk to the server at the coffee shop. You need to get the train conductor to let you on the train 1 minute after you were supposed to be there. You know, all of these different things like charm and poise and confidence, they all kind of stem out of a bunch of fundamentals, and speech and physicality are two of them. So yeah, public speaking was probably one of them.
That's a good parallel as well with the physicality and the mental fortitude side of things. And if you could offer any advice, simple advice, applicable, that would help people improve their life, that they could do every day on a daily basis, if you had to pick or, recommend one thing, what would it be?
Sleep with your phone outside of your bedroom. It is the quickest way to improve your quality of life if you aren't doing it already. I mean, I think a lot of people are, but just put the take the charging cable now and put it in the kitchen or in the living room, because when you can't sleep on the nighttime that funny cat videos and booty pictures are only 3 feet away, and it causes you to roll over in the middle of your sleep or the middle of the night when you're supposed to be sleeping, and it pushes your sleep time back, which means that you can ruin tomorrow before tomorrow's even begun. And you continually stick yourself in this cycle. It also means that when you wake up in the morning, you're less likely to check your phone. People go, I use my phone as an alarm. Bro, radio alarm clocks have been around for forever. Just get an alarm clock. Take your phone, put it outside of your room. It's the best change, the best lifestyle change, single, simple one that I've made probably ever. It's just so powerful.
Here. Less time on the phone, I think people could do with, for sure. And Chris, I appreciate your time and thank you for sharing some of your wisdom today. For people who want to follow along for more, obviously I'm going to put the links in the show notes and whatnot, and I couldn't second it more myself to obviously jump over onto your podcast and have a listen to some of the thought-provoking conversations. I know I've learned a lot myself, but give us some plugs, my friend. Where do people go? What do they look for? What do they search for?
Yep, Modern Wisdom, wherever you listen, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Chris Williamson on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you want a list of 100 books that you should read before you die, just go to chriswillex.com/books. It's a free PDF. It's got 100 of the most important and impactful books that I've ever read in my life. It's beautifully designed. It's got links to buy them straight away. I've got descriptions about why I love them, stuff from Existential Risk and evolutionary psychology and philosophy and fiction, fantasy series, sci-fi series in there. So yes, that's a pretty cool freebie that you can go and get. chriswillex.com/books.
Done. Love it. And I'll get that link off you as well. And guys, for those listening and watching, I'll put that right below. Some of which books are stacked behind you, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a vertical bookcase for you there, mate. Yeah, that's also penis extension. Doubles up as a penis extension, yeah.
Well, most people have DVDs, mate. You've got books, so what can I say? That's a better weapon of choice, I'd say. Chris, thank you for your time again. Much appreciated. Guys, for everyone tuning and listening or watching, thank you for listening, as always. And if it is safe to do so, make sure to leave a rating and a review. Appreciate everyone who's done that as of late. And also remember to share this on. If you found it helpful, pay it forward. Helps the channel grow. And until the next episode, stay fearless. For those of you who are confused, frustrated, and sick and tired of not seeing the results that you want or deserve, make sure that you click the Apply for Coaching button in the description below and line up a completely free consultation with myself where we can discover if it's a good fit as client and coach and take your health and physique to the next level once and for all.